Okay, you a goon, but what's a goon to a goblin? Today, we're talking about foils. Welcome back to Read Her Like a Book, where we read and then we read. Here, I connect the media we see on our screens to what we've always seen in books to encourage more people to think critically about what we're consuming. New episodes drop every Thursday. Happy New Year. I'm so excited. I just had a vision board party slash dinner party, and I'm super proud of myself because I get a little anxious about hosting. I get a little nervous, but I put myself out there. And one of my goals for the new year is to be more social and to do things that really frighten me because you can always grow from that. So I'm really proud of myself. I feel like the person I was in 2025 was a little more timid, a little more anxious. So I'm really excited for 2026 just to take up more space, be more boisterous, speak my mind, act a fool, just be myself and be unapologetic. All right, let's get into the pages. Today's episode is about foils. Foils are two characters whose traits contrast one another. And this contrast draws attention to a character's strengths, weaknesses, values. And when the foils are in close proximity with another, that's when we start making qualitative evaluations about the character. A really good example of this is Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy. Harry doesn't look like a good person or a humble person until Draco comes in the room and he starts rah-rah-rah-rahing, and then it's like, whoa. Another good example is from the novel People Person by Candace Carty Williams. So two of the characters in there, two half-sisters, Dimple and Lizzie, are complete foils. This novel follows five half siblings who share the same father, and one of the siblings gets into a sticky situation, and then they all come in to help her, and then everything spirals and it just kind of becomes a mess. So we have Dimple. She is an aspiring influencer. She's in her late 20s, early 30s. She lives with her mom, and we meet her and we kind of notice, okay, she's a little insecure. Okay, she's a little unsure of herself. She's still finding her footing. And then we meet her half sister, Lizzie. Lizzie's in med school. She lives alone. She owns her apartment with her girlfriend. And we notice, okay, Lizzie's a little more confident. She's a little more sure of herself. On their own, neither character reads extreme. We have Dimple finding her way and Lizzie a little more organized. But when they get together, it's like, oh, they are completely different. And we start comparing the two and start making evaluations about their character. So, like I mentioned earlier, Dimple ends up in a sticky situation and she calls her siblings. This book, I don't want to ruin it, but something, kind of bad happens and Dimple is freaking out, basically about to have a panic attack. She's hooting and hollering, exclamation point, going crazy, crazy, crazy. And Lizzie's just like, super calm, very stoic. She's, handling the situation very well. And then we start realizing, oh, Dimple's kind of an emotional mess. And Lizzie is actually quite confident and quite stoic. But like I said earlier, we hadn't made these evaluations until they were in the room together. And we noticed Dimple is kind of acting crazy. And even me calling Dimple crazy, I didn't know to call her that until I saw how Lizzie was acting in the same situation. Another example of their differences is their emotional intelligence. So in the novel, their grandmother dies. That's their father's mother. These children in general don't have a great relationship with him. He's kind of treated fatherhood like a hobby. He's in and out of their lives. When his mom passes away and they're all there for the funeral, their dad is drunk. He's acting crazy. He's going kind of crazy. And Dimple is consoling him. She's, getting him water. She's getting him bread. She's taking care of him. And Lizzie is in the corner, like, Lizzie's in her black in the corner, like, why is dad wilding? Like, why is he acting like this? She's, not taking care of him. She's not paying him any mind. She's not consoling him. She's not asking him if it's okay. She's annoyed, honestly. She's irritated and she's not even like talking to him. And in that moment, we notice, oh, despite Dimple being kind of a mess, she's actually quite caring and emotionally intelligent, while Lizzie, on the other hand, is being super like cold and kind of mean to him. And I wouldn't have drawn these conclusions if these two sisters weren't placed side by side. Dimple doesn't look immature and emotionally all over the place until Lizzie is calm, and Lizzie wouldn't have looked emotionally cold or distant if Dimple weren't, being super caring and super kind to their father. And that's what a foil does. It doesn't create flaws, it exposes them. Proximity changes perception. We don't evaluate people in isolation, we compare them relative to who's standing next to them, which rolls into our first case study, Jake Paul and Anthony Joshua. I think we all saw that fight. Even if we didn't see the whole fight, we saw the clips. And that is such a good example of a foil because first we have Jake Paul. I really didn't know much about him, but I know that he is a former influencer who's kind of turned boxer. And when you look at him in isolation, he looks like, pretty ripped. He looks, strong. I've seen that, of course, we all know he fought Floyd Mayweather and won, albeit Floyd Mayweather was not in his prime. But we've seen that he has been actually very successful in his boxing career. He looks serious about his work. He looks like he's, a strong fighter, great shape. He looks like, he's a real contender until Anthony Joshua comes into the ring. Anthony Joshua is taller than him, he's heavier than him, he looks stronger than him, and it starts kind of changing our perception of Jake Paul because when we see them side by side, them pictures they have before the fight when they're all we see them and it's like, oh, maybe Jake Paul's not as strong and as fit and as, intimidating as we thought because next to Anthony Joshua, he looks like, child's play. And that is the foil at work. Remember, we don't evaluate people in isolation. We evaluate them who they're next to. And because Jake Paul was next to heavyweight Anthony Joshua, it makes us rethink everything we thought about Jake Paul. Standing next to Anthony Joshua doesn't create Jake Paul's weaknesses, it just exposes them. And I mean, we saw the fight. Anthony Joshua hit him with a 1-2. And what's crazy is that during the entire fight, it was just Jake Paul like holding on to Anthony Joshua's leg. It was Jake Paul trying to intimidate Anthony Joshua by like sticking his tongue out. Jake Paul honestly looked like a clown. He looked like the court jester because Anthony Joshua looked very calm. He looked confident. He was using the correct techniques. There's a point where Jake Paul kind of crosses his arms in front of each other, which is a big fighting faux pas because it exposes you. We look at Anthony Joshua and he just looks so good next to Jake Paul. And the thing is, like, Anthony Joshua is not perfect. I'm sure he's lost fights before. But when you look at him next to Jake Paul, he looks like a god. Jake Paul looks like a person, and Anthony Joshua looks like a god. And I mean, we saw the Anthony Joshua uppercut and we saw the Anthony Joshua mink. I mean, we saw that hook. It literally broke Jake Paul's jaw in two places. I remember after the fight, Jake Paul was doing the post-game interview and he was like, I think my jaw is broken. It's like in that moment, everything Jake Paul has done, all his wins, all his accolades, just look a little bit lesser than because you have someone who's an active fighter and you kind of got rocked even after the fight, Jake Paul, he's just known as being kind of, abrasive, kind of brash. He's addressed that he gets a lot of hate watch views. And so he just looks like, kind of annoying, kind of like not that great of a person. And then you have Anthony Joshua, who looks so gracious. After the fight, he's posing with every single person, every single fan. He's taking selfies. He literally apologized to Jake Paul's mom after the fight. And it's like in that moment in isolation, Jake Paul just, acting crazy and then Anthony Joshua, taking pictures with fans. It's like, okay. But when you compare the two, it just makes Anthony Joshua look that much better and Jake Paul look even more brash, even more, abrasive, even more conceited. And that's the thing with foils. When you put two people in a room together, we're going to evaluate them. We're going to compare them. And when you put them together, Anthony Joshua just looks bigger, stronger, faster, and he also looks nicer compared to Jake Paul. The foil reframes everything we know, but the biggest comparison wasn't in a fight, it was in a conversation. If you haven't seen by now, Natalie Nunn went on Cam Newton's podcast, and honestly, she ate him up. Ate him up. So Cam Newton has a podcast. It's called Funky Fridays, where he sits down with people, kind of a conversational sort of vibe, but it's still an interview. He asks questions, and then the guest, answers them, and they just kind of we get to know them on a more intimate level. And this week he had Natalie Nunn. Cam Newton, we know him. He's a former professional football player. He played for the Panthers. He played at Auburn in college. We just know him to be super confident. He's tall. He's handsome. charming, articulate. I mean, he has a degree from Auburn in sociology. He's worked on ESPN. We kind of know him as being, keeping his calm, being super professional. I mean, we all saw that clip of him. He was hosting something for the kids and someone swung on him. And it's like he was able to protect himself without even swinging on the kid. And he had that hat still stay on his head. So we think about him and we're like, okay, he's cool under pressure. He's like a cool guy. He's obviously super smart, well spoken. The fact that he can have a job on ESPN. So we know him and we're like, all right, Cam is like, he's also cool, but he's super, super smart. And then we have Natalie Nunn. I don't know anything about baddies. I don't really know much about her, but the reputation about baddies is that these girls are trashy and all they do is fight and they're uneducated. So initially, we're thinking, okay, Cam is going to dominate this interview. He's going to make her look, even worse. Cam is going to be his charming, educated self, and Natalie Nunn is going to come on the screen and just act a fool. Boy, was I wrong. And so when the interview starts, I notice Cam is asking Natalie Nunn super basic questions. He didn't even know she created baddies. He didn't know where she went to school. He didn't know she was educated. He didn't know anything about her. And then Natalie Nunn, on the other hand, is familiar with Cam's career. She knew his zodiac sign. And so immediately we start looking at Cam sideways because how are you less prepared than your guest? Mind you, she was a guest on the show. So he just looks crazy because had Natalie Nunn not known, that Cam had a really prolific career in college, prolific career in NFL, it wouldn't look that bad. You have someone like Natalie Nunn who's perceived trashy, knowing more than you when she's the guest. And also, just to add insult to injury, Cam Newton insults Natalie. He's like, oh, why should we respect baddies? What do baddies bring to the table? And it's like, Cam, that is your job as an interviewer to know these things already. You have these conversations so that we can get to know people on a more profound level, but you're asking her really basic stuff. What does a baddie bring to the table? He looked so unprepared compared to Natalie Nunn. I was watching it with a friend and we were saying it looked like Cam's team had made note cards and all he was doing was reading the questions. He didn't do any of his research. But Natalie Nunn, you can tell she did so much research about him. Just in general, as an interviewer, you should always know more about your guest, but he didn't know anything about her. And because she knew so much about him, he looked so unprepared and so disinterested. And let's get into their body language. So Cam Newton, he was sitting up. He was very strict. His arms were crossed. He was mumbling. He would start a question and then not finish it. For example, he would say, "So what is how would people?" And then you have Natalie Nunn. Her body language is open, her presence, her voice is loud. She's looking at Cam, she's looking at the people behind the camera, she's addressing the viewers, she's answering questions very confidently, she's speaking loud. And when you compare the two, Natalie Nunn looks way more confident than Cam. Again, we evaluate people who they're relative, who they're next to. If Natalie Nunn would have been mumbling and, would have been meek and mild, then it would have just looked like a normal interview. But because she's being so boisterous, she's being confident, she's speaking with clarity, she has eye contact, she's smiling, and then you have Cam Newton, arms crossed, frowning, mumbling, looking glued to the iPad, and Natalie Nunn is making eye contact. He looks so inadequate next to her. He looks unprepared, like I mentioned earlier, and then he looks like uncomfortable and inadequate next to someone who is exuding a lot of confidence. Cam Newton just looks inept. That's really the best word I can use to describe it. He looks inept. He's not prepared questions wise. His body language seems closed off. He seems almost robotic in the questions he's asking. And then you have Natalie Nunn, who just appears like an open book. And if Natalie Nunn would have interviewed maybe a more professional person like Oprah, maybe we wouldn't have been so surprised. Maybe we wouldn't have given her so much props for how she handled the interview because Oprah would obviously be prepared. She would know everything about her. Oprah would have watched Baddies, listened to her music, known about her entrepreneurial spirit. But because she's next to Cam Newton, who we all think is Mr. Big and Bad, and then we see him and it's like, oh, you actually aren't as great as we think you are. He looks 10 times worse and she looks 10 times better. And this is just like my little side note. I feel like with interviewing someone, you almost have to be submissive to your guest. Your guest is the person you're supposed to put on this pedestal. The guest, you're supposed to be interested in them. You're supposed to want to get to know them. You kind of have to recognize as the interviewer, it's not about you. I think Cam had an issue with being submissive to a baddie and putting a baddie on a pedestal because he clearly does not respect the show. I didn't know Natalie Nunn, so I had no views on her. But after watching this podcast, I have so much respect for her. I'm intrigued. I'm curious about her. And I don't know if I would have had this view on her if Cam Newton wouldn't have acted the way he acted. I have one closing PSA for this episode. Context is the loudest form of truth. That's it for episode 2 of Read Her Like a Book. Next week, we'll be reading Another Woman the Media Misunderstood. Until then, I'll catch you on the next page. Bye.